Authorities in Venezuela claim to have foiled a terrorist attack on a military base in Valencia. The governing United Socialist Party's Diosdado Cabello said loyal troops have re-established security at the base. According to authorities, 7 persons have been apprehended, with at least one of them dying. According to Afghan officials, militants in the northern province of Sari Pool have slain at least 50 civilians, including women and children. Insurgents attacked security posts and entered a community, killing civilians, including women and children, according to a spokesman for the BBC. He said that Taliban and Islamic State fighters were engaged, but the Taliban has denied that civilians were killed. They claim to have slain 28 militia members in the area. The U.S. has announced that it will withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. The United Nations has been informed, formally enforcing a decision made by President Trump in June. The State Department, on the other hand, stated that the United States will continue to participate in climate change discussions until the withdrawal process was finished. According to new research, weather-related calamities in Europe might kill more than 150,000 people per year by the end of the century. According to a European Commission research, heat waves are responsible for 99% of all weather-related deaths on the continent. However, first and foremost, the U.S. government has released its monthly employment data. It's one indicator of how well the economy is performing overall. The most recent report was for the month of September, and it was disappointing. Last month, economists predicted that 479,000 jobs would be added. According to the U.S. Labor Department, the actual number was less than half of that. It was the second month in a row that the number of jobs created to the American economy was significantly lower than experts had projected, and no one understands why. Many economists continue to be concerned about the coronavirus pandemic and the disease's Delta version. ISIS's long-term defeat remains a primary objective for the United States. The global coalition to defeat ISIS, led by the United States, is driving stabilization operations to consolidate military advances, restore basic vital services, and allow Syrians to return to their homes in Raqqa and other former ISIS strongholds voluntarily and safely. Explosive hazard and rubble clearance, as well as supplying clean water, repairing electricity networks, and other basic necessities, are all part of the assistance. Since April, the U.S. has received about $300 million in contributions and pledges from coalition partners to help with urgent stabilization and early recovery efforts in ISIS-free areas in northeast Syria. First and foremost, family members, politicians, historians, and civil rights campaigners are paying respect to Colin Powell, an 84-year-old American military and political leader who died on Monday. Powell has an impressive resume that began with his service in the Reserve Officers Training Corps while still in college. Powell had earned the highest rank in the ROTC at the time, and he continued to progress his military career from there. Powell was a 4-star general in the United States Army after serving in combat during the Vietnam War. Powell became America's first black national security advisor during Ronald Reagan's presidency. Powell became the first African American chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff under President George H. W. Bush.
Authorities in the Spanish city of Barcelona said a vehicle deliberately drove into them at a popular tourist market, killing 13 people and injuring 80 more. The vehicle sped through the city center's Las Ramblas before being abandoned by the driver, who fled. As police searched for suspects, hundreds of tourists and locals sought refuge in shops and churches. 2 of them, including a Moroccan male, were detained a few hours later. Another suspect was killed in a police gunfight on the outskirts of the city, according to Spanish media. Mariano Rajoy, the Spanish Prime Minister, who is on his way to Barcelona, says he will coordinate security measures, while Carles Puigdemont, the Catalan president, adds, The driver of the van that mowed down crowds walking down Barcelona's major tourist boulevard last Thursday, killing 13 people, has been identified, according to Spanish police. They haven't given him a name, but he is believed to be Yunus Abouyacoub, a 22-year-old Moroccan. He may have fled the country, according to police. Despite a global trade ban, a South African court has approved an online auction of rhino horns. Authorities attempted to halt the 3-day sale. Rhino horns are in high demand in Vietnam and China due to their use in traditional medicine. The South African government has revealed that Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, has been granted diplomatic protection, allowing her to return home despite being accused of beating a model in South Africa. Late Saturday, the United States and South Korea declared that their annual large-scale joint military exercises will come to an end as part of diplomatic efforts to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The Pentagon stated in a statement that Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan and South Korean Minister of National Defense decided to stop the Key Resolve and Foal Eagle exercises in a phone call on Saturday. The announcement comes 3 days after a summit in Vietnam between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un concluded without a deal to end the nuclear standoff. According to the Associated Press, Seoul's defense ministry issued a similar statement. China is speeding up its efforts, proposing a long-awaited plan to transform the Pearl River Delta in the country's south into a huge center of technology, research, finance, and creativity. According to observers, the project's opportunities and problems are both challenging and promising. Some see the proposal as an attempt to build a mega-city to compete with Silicon Valley, the U.S. technology powerhouse that is home to Google, Facebook, and Apple. However, although Silicon Valley has a population of 3.1 million, the Greater Bay Area will connect 9 cities with Hong Kong and Macau, totaling roughly 70 million people in the economic clout, according to state media, to drive the Chinese economy, let alone the world. The impact of the United States' plans to withdraw New Delhi's privileged trade status, which enables duty-free access to $5.6 billion in goods, has been understated by India. President Donald Trump has asked the U.S. Trade Representative's office to remove India from a program that offers it special trade status, claiming that India has not satisfied the U.S. that it will allow equitable and reasonable access to its markets. The Generalized System of Preferences, GSP, which cuts tariffs on exports from roughly 120 developing nations, benefited India the most in 2017. In New Delhi, India's Trade Secretary told reporters that the country had no intentions to put retaliatory tariffs on American goods.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj in Washington on Monday, telling him that the U.S. stands with India in the battle against terrorism. The two highlighted the need of bringing those responsible for a suicide attack on an Indian paramilitary convoy claimed by Pakistan-based extremists after their meeting, according to the State Department. The officials discussed the urgency of Pakistan taking decisive action against terrorist groups operating on its land, according to the State Department. In the disputed Kashmir area, a suicide bomber killed 40 Indian paramilitary troops in a convoy last month. A militant group based in Pakistan claimed responsibility for the violence. Approximately 10 million tons of paper are disposed of in landfills and incinerators in the United States each year, which is not only wasteful but also adds CO2 to the atmosphere. Even if you recycle, you'll have to repulp and paperize the material before you can print out that recipe you'll never bake. But what if you could clean the page and reuse it? To the rescue, light amplification via simulated radiation emission. According to a new study, laser light can remove toner from printed paper. The method was published in Proceedings of the Royal Society. Scientists took a page from the Art Restoration Handbook and tested a range of light sources to see if any might be utilized to restore artwork. UV and infrared rays were too damaging. Similarly, practical exposure is needed in universities and institutions so that students can see how an industry works in real life. Taking a student to a manufacturing company, for example, will provide him or her a greater understanding of the business. In response to this shift, most professional colleges, including B schools, have begun to provide students with practical experience through guest lectures, industry visits, conferences, seminars, cultural festivals, and other activities. Students are better able to identify their potential areas of work in the overall organizational function as a result of industrial visits. They also aid in the development of interpersonal skills and communication approaches. In addition, guest lectures are critical for students' overall growth. It's a fantastic approach for kids to get the most exposure possible. Many folks don't feel completely human without that first cup of coffee in the morning. According to a new study, caffeine's heightened sensation of well-being is reflected in our interpretation of words. Caffeine specifically improves the ability to distinguish words linked with good emotions, but not ones associated with negative or even neutral emotions. The study was published in the PLOS One journal. The scientists divided the 66 participants into two groups. Half of the participants were given a 200 mg caffeine tablet, which is about equivalent to 3 cups of coffee. A sugar tablet was given to the other half. After 30 minutes, the volunteers were presented strings of letters and had to evaluate as quickly as possible whether a string formed a word. Traditionally, road safety studies on driver behavior have focused on the role of the male driver. While this is consistent with the reality that male drivers account for the majority of fatal crashes, the proportion of fatal crashes involving female drivers has been steadily growing for decades. Consequently, whereas nearly all drivers murdered 45 years ago were male, the number of female drivers killed had climbed to 13% in 1970. And females now account for between 22% and 27% of all driver deaths in recent years. In light of this paper looks at the variations in travel characteristics, fatal crash risk, fatal crash features, and factors affecting injury outcome between male and female drivers.
Those who are enthusiastic and optimistic find it easy to learn the art of living. We may learn a lot about the art of life by looking into the lives of people who are humble and simple, as well as outstanding leaders in history, science, and literature. The daily routines of these great individuals indicate not only their various, possibly distinct lifestyles, but also certain habits and practices that they followed. Here are a few. Read them, appreciate them, and follow in their footsteps as you see fit. A private workspace is usually beneficial. Jane Austen requested that a particular noisy hinge never be oiled so that she would be alerted whenever someone entered the room where she wrote. In the absence of a lock on his study door, William Faulkner removed the doorknob and carried it into the room with him. False memories are created by blending real memories with the substance of other people's ideas. Individuals may forget the source of the knowledge during the process. This is a classic case of source confusion, where the content and the source are no longer linked. Of course, just because we can implant false childhood memories in some people does not mean that all memories that occur as a result of suggestion are also false. To put it another way, while research on the creation of false memories raises questions about the authenticity of long-buried experiences like repeated trauma, it does not refute them. A group of academics from many disciplines recognized the need of researching conflict as a phenomenon a few years ago. They were fascinated by the various characteristics of conflict in international relations, national politics, labor relations, communities, and even household settings. These academics believed that methodologies from several disciplines could be combined to research conflict and better understand its causes, impacts, and remedies. As a result, study organizations sprang up, and universities and academic magazines began to publish studies on what became known as conflict theory. Many other academics, however, were not enthusiastic about this new field. They couldn't reconcile it with old scholarly procedures because it was both practical and analytical. Two simultaneous microwave pulses were used to chill the drums. 2 more pulses were used to entangle the drums, and 2 final pulses were used to amplify and record the signals reflecting the quantum states of the 2 drums. Similar to radar, the states are encoded in a reflected microwave field. The position and momentum of each drum were determined by comparing the reflections to the initial microwave pulse. Researchers used pulses at a frequency lower than the cavity's natural oscillations to cool the drums. The drumbeats converted applied photons to the cavity's higher frequency, just as they did in the 2011 experiment. As the cavity filled up, photons began to leak out. Each photon carried 1 mechanical unit of energy with it, called a phonon. The type of processing facility may also increase the likelihood of meat contamination, according to the study. Meat processors are classified as either exclusively organic, exclusively conventional, or split processors, which handle both organic and conventional meats. According to the study, conventional meats processed at facilities that only handled conventional meats were infected 1/3 of the time, whereas conventional meats processed at facilities that processed both conventional and organic meats were contaminated 1/4 of the time. In both meat processor categories, the prevalence of multidrug-resistant bacteria was similar.